Hello and welcome to Dear Franny. I'm your host, Francesca Hogi. I'm a recovered lawyer turned love and life coach, and this podcast is the place where I talk all things love and true love, from dating and relationships to manifesting a life that you love. Thank you for being here. I'm back. Apologies for no new episode last Friday, but hopefully you were able to check out the replay of the episode, What Manifestation Means, which is a good foundational episode if you are newer to the topic of manifestation, or you just want a refresher, or you're just curious to hear my perspective on manifestation, because many people have many different perspectives. So that's last week. But this week, I want to talk to you about what it is that you expect to happen. And I mean, what do you expect to happen for yourself romantically? What do you expect to happen in your life generally? Any circumstances that you're in right now that are unwanted? What do you expect to happen? And I'll just give you an example. I realized the other day I've been having an issue with my knee. And I've had this on and off knee issue for many years, but it's been flaring up a lot lately. And, it got to the point where I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna have to go to the doctor. And I made an appointment, but then I wound up having to cancel the appointment and all of this. So nothing has happened with my knee except for that the pain has been getting worse and it's been swelling and all this. And I realized the other day, I was like, what do I expect to happen with my knee? And I realized that I expected one of two things to happen. I either expected that it was going to eventually work itself out, which is kind of what has happened in the past. And then in some future date, it'll flare up again like it does from time to time. That was one expectation. And then the other expectation was that I go to the doctor and then I have to go through the route of x-rays and MRIs and all of this. And so when I realized neither of these two expectations I have about this situation with my knee are really what I want. Like, what do I actually want? And I know that, this is a very specific example, but I hope that as you're listening to it, you're thinking about, well, what is it in your life? What is your expectation about dating? What's your expectation about what's possible for you romantically? What do you actually think is going to happen? If you had to predict, what do you think is going to happen? So I asked myself, okay, well, that's what I expect to happen, but what do I actually want to happen? I'm like, well, what I want to happen is for me to figure out how to heal this knee holistically, organically, and it's just never an issue again. That's actually what I want to happen, right? And so part of me is like, well, that's not, is that likely? And this is what we do, right? We think about what we actually want, what we really, really would love to happen. But then we say, but that's not realistic. And maybe sometimes it's not. If, you're like, well, what I would love to happen is I have the power to teleport myself to another, dimension. Okay, maybe that's not going to happen in this dimension. I can't speak for the other dimensions that I've never been to, but I'm talking about, obviously, realistically speaking, right? And is it possible for me to heal my knee? Absolutely. People have healed way worse conditions, very serious diseases, all sorts of ailments. People have healed themselves. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just change this expectation, because in life, we have these expectations and we then have the choice to either agree with what that expectation is or disagree. So in this example, I disagreed with the expectation that there were these two routes available with what's going to happen with my knee. And then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to agree with that. I'm going to come up with a new option, which is the one that I really love. And this is actually, this is how we manifest anything, really, because what this comes down to is feeling empowered enough to know that you can make things happen for yourself. So I know the knee, maybe that's a little bit of a strange example, but I'll give you another example that's related to dating. When I was back, it was probably about 10 years ago when all of this data started coming out around online dating and about Black women online and how we are the least messaged, we're the least favorited, and all of these things. And basically in the hierarchy of who gets, the most matches and the most attention online, Black women are at the bottom. And this data came out and there was a book about it and all sorts of news articles and news coverage and conversation around it. And at the time, I was single. I was dating online, and I knew that that was the expectation that most Black women had at that time, and still do to this day, have an expectation that online it's going to be harder for me. There are going to be fewer people who want to date me. There are going to be fewer people who respond to my messages, etc. And I recognize that I don't agree with this expectation. I'm not co-signing this as my destiny here. I'm just going to believe that I'm not going to have any trouble connecting with the people who are excited to meet me. And if someone doesn't want to meet me because I'm Black or any other reason, then I don't want to meet them either. So I did not give it my energy. And, some of you have heard me talk about this before. I did really, really well online, right? Like I got lots and lots of matches, and I was one of the most popular people on OkCupid in New York City at that time. I think there were more people on OkCupid then than there are now. No shade to OkCupid. I'm actually a fan of that site. But anyway, my point being that when we let ourselves just accept things and, quote unquote, agree to things that we don't want to be true, we're already setting ourselves up to settle. We're already setting ourselves up for some struggle. And this is in all parts of life. And so even though the show is about love, and obviously that's typically the focus, I really want you to think about this more broadly. Like, well, what are my expectations? What are my expectations for myself career-wise? What are my expectations for how much money I'll make? What are my expectations for my friendships? What are my expectations for my relationship with myself or with my body? And just start to brainstorm about these major areas of life. And of course, what are my expectations about romantic relationships, right? What do I actually think is going to happen? And what do I actually expect? And when you ask yourself that, then the question is, well, is that what I want, right? Am I agreeing with this expectation, or am I ready to consider a new possibility? And ultimately, I believe that regardless of what our challenges are, transcendence is always possible. So transcendence is a rising above, right? It's not just trying to struggle through, it's a rising above. And, a really great example of this is, there are people who, in the midst of really horrible life circumstances, whether they're in the midst of war, famine, disease, poverty, abuse, violence, all sorts of really challenging situations. And there are some people who, in the midst of all of that, and sometimes maybe for the first time, once they're in the midst of a situation like that, they are able to unlock a whole new level of inner peace, of inner power. So there's something in them of love, right, of possibility. So there's something in them that has transcended their outer circumstances. Other people would have had an expectation, oh, if you're in a situation like that, oh, you're screwed. If you're in a situation like that, it's going to be really hard. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Some people would say, if you're in a situation like that, you don't have a chance, right? And so how many of us have had a version of that in our lives, whether it's dramatic or not? In your situation, what was the expectation for you? And how many times in life have you defied those expectations, right? How many times have you risen above? How many times have you transcended whatever those perceived limitations have been? So we can see that in other people when we hear these stories of people who've been imprisoned. And, Shaka Senghor, who is an author, he's a great example of this. He's someone who spent decades incarcerated for crimes that he willingly, he confesses that he committed. And he's extremely regretful of what he did. But while he was in prison, he became an author. While he was in prison, he became a man of faith who became heart-centered. And since he was released from prison 13 years ago, because I just saw he posted that the other day, since he's been writing these books, he's been traveling the world, he's been changing people's lives, right? And so he was able to transcend circumstances that many of us would look at and say, oh, that's terrible, and, it's hopeless. So again, I'm giving all of these different kinds of examples just to show you, even though you may not be in a situation that is that dramatic, even though you may not be, maybe in a demographic where you feel particularly discriminated against in dating or what have you, it doesn't matter. Everyone has some limitations that we are putting on ourselves just by our expectations and agreeing, right? Subconsciously, tacitly, implicitly agreeing, right? Well, these are the only options available to me. And it's so amazing when you can start to step beyond your imagination and your individual perspective on what's possible and open yourself up to receive new evidence and new perspective. Because just as there was that part of me that resisted for a moment when I said, well, wait, what do I want to happen with my knee? I'm like, well, I don't know how realistic that is. By the way, it's been now a few days of me really working on my knee, doing energy work on my knee, massaging my knee. I have these tuning forks that are part of my sound healing instruments, and you strike them and they cause the fork to vibrate at a certain frequency. And my knee is actually so much better. Like, the swelling has gone down. I have so much more range of motion, and it's a whole thing that I'm doing, a whole process, just that I'm experimenting with here. But even just holding that thought in my mind of, oh yeah, I'm in perfect health. With every step, I'm getting stronger. Like, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for my vibrant health. I'm so grateful for my strong limbs and joints. I'm just so grateful. And that's what I've been doing. And it's been making a difference. So whether you want to call that a placebo effect or not, the point is, and again, I know this is kind of a strange example for me to use on this podcast. There is always an opportunity for us to examine what we're settling for, what limitations that maybe very reasonably we have taken on. Maybe that's the logic, maybe that's the data, that's our past experience, that's the only thing we've ever seen. It's not a judgment of where these expectations come from, but when you can start to look at them and question them, that is such a place of power. And that's where you get to unlock so much more potential for yourself. And even if you just experiment with this, you'll start to see, you're like, oh, wait a second. I didn't really know how that could have made a difference. Just making a decision, just setting an intention, just opening myself up to new possibility. But I am starting to see new evidence. Other things are starting to come in. I'm having a perspective shift that I never had before. It's so powerful. So when it comes to romantic love, and I'm going to wrap this up, let's end this about love. When it comes to romantic love, and particularly the single journey, the dating journey, that journey to loving yourself enough to actually have the relationship that you want, right? And not settle for less than that. On that journey, transcendence is, in my opinion, it is not just helpful, but it is actually required. It's required if you want to not just leave love to chance, but if you actually want to make it an inevitable result of how you think about love, feel about love, the energy that you embody around love, the way that you move through the world. I believe that no matter what your circumstances are, you can make that love inevitable, but you can't do that unless you're willing to consider the possibility that that's true. That you have that much power, that you have that much influence, especially when it comes to romantic love, which your entire life you've been told is something that's outside, out there. You got to find it. You got to kiss a million frogs. You got to swim in some big ocean. And then that ocean doesn't work. You go to another, all the metaphors and all of the normalization that we have around really struggling in romantic love. And what I am so excited about is the possibility that we have moving forward in the future to start to transcend some of this struggle just by examining the stories, just by examining the expectations. Because if everybody who was frustrated with the state of modern romance was willing to take an objective look, and I know this is easier said than done, because even when you want to do it, it can still be challenging, right? We have so much programming in this area and it's so triggering. But if we can, the more that we can take a look at like, well, what am I bringing to this situation? What energy am I bringing to love? What energy am I bringing to dating? And what are my expectations? Because that's going to dictate your energy, right? That's going to dictate so much of what you do because you're just going to act in alignment with what you think is possible. That only makes sense. So embracing new possibility is so, so powerful. So I really hope that this episode has inspired you to give some real thought to what are those expectations you have for your life? Do you actually agree with those expectations, right? Even if that's been your expectation in the past, now that you're looking at it with fresh eyes, is this something that you want to agree to? Or is this something that you want to transcend? Is this something that you are ready to expand and experience something beyond what you have thought is possible? A phrase that had been coming to me recently or has been. It's kind of slowed down a little bit further, but there was a little while there where I was hearing it in my head all the time, which is what lies beyond my wildest dreams. And it was just a way for me to remind myself that as many plans as I can make and as much as I can, have dreams of how I think things should work out in my life, that ultimately our individual perspective is just a tiny, tiny, tiny atom of a grain of sand on the infinite beach of the universe in terms of what's possible and in terms of true perspective. So there's a bit of humility that we need to maintain. And I say we, I mean me. And I have to remind myself to stay humble and to know that I don't control the universe. I can barely control myself, right? So it's just a matter of understanding what my expectation is matters. What my actions are matter. But other than that, stepping into a place of surrender, stepping into a place of trust, that is also as important, if not more important. So that's where I am right now. I'm really stepping deeper and deeper into trusting and surrendering to the universe. And again, examining what are these expectations I have, and then making a choice to up level them because I'm ready for that. I'm ready to up level so many things in my life. As beautiful as my life is and as grateful as I am, I want to live in a much more unlimited way because, as Oprah says, I always quote Oprah when I say this, God can dream a bigger dream for you than you can dream for yourself. And whether you believe in God or the universe or life force or prana or whatever you name that power, that force, I think we all know that's true. We all intuitively know that's true. And when you really, really accept the truth of that statement, it gives you more ability to surrender and to be grateful that we don't have to do it all on our own, right? That there is this other force that is supporting us in our endeavors, if only we are able to call upon it, and if only we're able to dream a bigger dream for ourselves and to consider our power and what's possible for us in our lives. So I hope that all made sense. But yep, I'm just going to leave you with my wish, my prayer, for my hope for you to examine these expectations, to disagree with the ones that you're no longer on board with, and to transcend the challenges, especially the biggest challenges in your life. Stepping into a place of transcendence and knowing that you don't have to struggle through it all is just really, really powerful. So I thank you very much for listening, as always, wherever you are in the world. I thank you and I appreciate you so much. Those of you who are subscribed to the podcast, you rated the podcast, you review the podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please do share it with a friend, share it on social, and feel free to connect with me. I am at Dear Franny everywhere. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Clubhouse. Oh, actually, I should also mention quickly before I go, I will include this in the show notes, but there is a new wellness platform called True Voice. And for the remainder of the summer, I'm hosting a live conversation about love on True Voice. It's totally free. It's an intimate conversation, and you can just drop in and just be in the audience and listen, and you don't have to participate if you don't want to. But it's a new platform, and I will post a link in the show notes with my invite code, because you do need an invite code right now just to download the app, but it's available in the app stores and all of that. And it's going to take place every Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific time here on the West Coast. That's 5 p.m. Eastern time, et cetera, et cetera. For those of you in the UK, that's 11 p.m. and on and on. So please, I would love to see you on True Voice on Mondays. Unfortunately, these conversations are not recorded. So if you aren't able to attend live, then just join us the next Monday. But other than that, that's it for now. Again, check the show notes for the link to True Voice. Have a beautiful day or night wherever you are in the world, and I'll be back next week. All right, take care.